Welcome back to another episode of Mixed Messages. This is the second season, and we're doing the Young Love series. So I'm now getting a little bit more comfortable on the microphone, and I'm thinking I don't like the long-winded intros, so I'm going to, without further ado, introduce you to our guest, Natalie. Natalie, welcome to the show.
Hello.
Hey.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
I can't wait. I'm so excited for this. It's been a while.
It's certainly been a while.
So why don't you tell us a little bit about how you got in this seat? How do you know me? What's your story with that?
Well, I knew you from your son Michael, actually, your previous guest. And I have known him since I was a sophomore in high school. We met each other as mutual friends, and then we had a really interesting chemistry from the beginning. And through that, we ended up actually dating a few years later. This is a very abridged version.
Yeah.
If you want to hear
we
that.
We love the story. Keep it. Yeah, tell us as deep as you want.
We had a really interesting chemistry from the beginning. There was something there that not very romantic, so to speak. It was more or less just two souls really meshing well together. I've never met a person that I could bounce off of so easily like that. And from there, I knew I wanted to talk to him more. He became from a person I just knew to a person I wanted to see almost every day. And long story short, I broke up with my ex my junior year of high school.
And he was your friend while you were dating somebody else, so
yes.
There was obviously knew it was platonic.
Very, very platonic. It was kind of uncomfortable because my ex was not sort of threatened by him, but he didn't really like me hanging out with him as much. So when I finally got to break up with him, that was more or less of me finally being able to talk to him more and finally putting the friendship into my own hands and not feeling like I'm pushing any sort of boundary between him or the other person.
Yeah, we're very mature of you.
And so from that point, I was kind of in an emotional hardship at the time because it's hard to break up with somebody that you've been with for over a year. I get attachment. I grew up with attachment issues, so I can't let go of things easily. So if I'm with somebody, I'm committed to that person until I feel like it is wrong. And so here, I was sort of at this weird state because I find it difficult to be by myself sometimes. For over a year and a half, I was finally in my own space. And then this really good friend of mine was helping me and really helping me transition from being with somebody to being by myself, that I started growing an attachment to Michael, actually. And that chemistry that we had before turned into a different sort of chemistry very quickly.
Before we go there, why don't you tell us a little bit about what the grieving looked like for you while you were in it? I mean, again, it's young love. How old were you at this time again?
I was about 17.
17, right? And it sounds like you were with this person for a year, you said?
Over a year and a half. I was with that person since I was fresh into high school.
I mean, that's a significant relationship, right?
My first relationship.
Exactly, right? So then what was the grieving like then coming out of it? Because, I mean, you had made the decision, but it's so hard. All of us at all ages have to reconcile that even if we know something's right for us, make rational, sane decisions to maybe bring them to an end. It still hurts. There's still heartbreak. There's still other feelings. What were yours like?
Mine was more freeing, but at the same time, I never really could understand true happiness because without saying anything bad about anybody, I felt like I wasn't my full person. I felt I was somebody else with that person. I felt like they melded me into a different person. And I wanted to finally be myself, but it was difficult. When you're not yourself for so long, you have to find yourself in a way. And through that, I was also trying to find myself through somebody else. I'm a people person. So I was finding myself through my friends who were trying to change me to what they wanted from me, which made it even worse because these people wanted to be with me in a romantic setting. And I didn't, but they were trying to get me to that setting. So they were giving me the attention I wanted and the space and friendship I needed, but they were doing it to get something different out of me.
I use that word motive a lot. Do you think they had a motive?
Oh, they totally had different ulterior motives than I did. And At first, I just thought it was mutual, just a mutual friendship, attention. That's
And who are we talking about here? Is this generally some people in your life? Yeah.
generally other friends in our friend group.
Yeah. I remember Michael talking a little bit about this. Yeah. I mean, okay, go ahead, please.
It definitely made it difficult because these friends that I thought that I had were friends with me for a completely different reason than I was with them.
That's always a hard truth, isn't it?
Yeah. And so long story short, here I am, a slightly broken person because of this really difficult, toxic place I was in. The environment I was in was very...
Yeah, take a breath. Exactly. Take your time with it. Take your time. It's perfect. This is the perfect kind of pause that we're here for.
strangling. I want to say strangling.
Strangling.
Yeah, so it's like a dark cloud that's constantly over you and your sides are constantly pushing in. And as a person who doesn't have much muscle on her arms, it's very difficult to push it out. And from then forth, I finally found a person that understood what it is to be just true and pure. Michael is a very pure person. You can sense it from a mile away. He has nothing that he wants to hide from anybody. He's a very open book, even if he doesn't say much.
Right, yeah. I would tend to agree.
And him and I were very good friends. And then we had that kiss that was mentioned in the prior episode. And I felt like it wasn't spoken out as well because...
Yeah, why don't you go there with us? Yeah, let's recap. Let's do your side of the story.
We decided to go on a Halloween trip with our friends. And I felt like throughout the night was a very good night. We were all together. It was great. We were catching up on things. I felt like I was finally in a good place at that moment. And then we decided to meet up with some other friends. And then myself, a very attention-wanting person, wasn't getting that immediate attention. And I felt like I was at the back of the line constantly. Literally, we were standing in a line, walking through the
You're
sidewalks.
literally at the back of the line, right? Yeah. And there's nobody who can't relate to what you're saying. Yeah.
And there I am at the back while everybody else is having their own conversations. And then Michael seems to notice, and then he comes and joins me. We're talking. I'm finally being able to talk to somebody, and I'm not just trailing behind with a bag of candy. There we go. And I decide to tell him, how about we split off since they're already walking 10 steps ahead of us regardless. What's the point at this point, you know? And we decide to trail off, and on our walk, we talk about some very deep things. I was talking about things that were troubling me at the time, him as well. And there was this connection and comfort between us.
A peace or something, huh?
Very much. We walked past a hedge of flowers, and I felt like that really helped shape the moment because those flowers are just there to grow.
Wow, how romantic.
They're not there to do anything bad to anybody. They weren't even roses, so they didn't have any sort of thorn to defend themselves against. They were just some simple yellow flowers.
And yet to be admired for just what they are.
Yes, they're just there to grow and live. They don't have any ulterior motives.
Nobody's asking them to be anybody else or look any different way. Why aren't you red? Or why are you this color? Or, right? Why are you longer? No, they get to just be natural flowers in the wild.
They just get to be. They have no ulterior motives for any other leaf that's on them. And one thing led to another, and then we kiss each other. And it was nothing too big. It was just a simple kiss. And then...
Did he lean in or you lean in?
I believe he did. And then I followed suit.
He'll be glad you said that. Anyway, yeah, go ahead. That was unfair dad questions. Anyway, go ahead.
And then a friend of ours drove by. He ended up going home early, saw that happen, and then told everybody that that was the only reason I went off with him.
Right. Like that was so not the plan. That was not what was going down. It was a totally different vibe that came out of it. But now it's a little group scandal.
Yes.
Ugh.
I felt really bad about it. It happened so sudden. I was getting texts. I was getting calls. People were talking about me way more than I ever wanted to. And they never even tried to listen to me. They jumped to conclusions without me. And one of the main reasons for that was they all tried to claim me. They thought that since I was being friendly with them and giving them their attention, they thought they could claim me and ask me out.
That's so powerful that you say that word. That's actually something I'm going to be talking about a lot more and actually writing a book about called Claim Me. Can you speak to what you mean by claiming me?
What I'm trying to say here is when you
Forget what I'm doing with it, but I love the terminology, and I never heard anybody else say it. So yeah, I'd love to hear your point of view on that.
when you're so attached to something and you have this emotional connection to it that you feel the right and you feel obliged to own it. It is yours. Possess it as well. Very much. You believe that since you have this connection to it, it's not I have a connection with this thing. It's I have a connection to have this
It's almost
thing.
like a shiny object now.
Yes.
And you want it.
Yes.
You want to claim it for your own.
Yes. And there's no we, there's no this mutual connection.
Not even a discussion.
Yes.
Like, why aren't you letting me claim you?
Yes.
The gall of them.
Yeah.
What the hell?
Exactly.
Well, that's crazy land.
As soon as you get to that point of making that attachment, it is now not a mutual sewing together. It is a railing it in by a fishing line.
Sure the hell looks like that. Yeah, nicely said. Great visual.
I remember the day after all of this went down, I was so nervous. I wanted to explain myself very quickly. I decided in my head I was doing a mini little protest. So I wore white to school the next day on purpose because I wanted to showcase that I wasn't the person they thought I was.
Oh, right, because you were kind of in the black emo thingy. There may be a little bit more then, right? I don't use that word. That was what Michael told me what, right? Just, or not emo, but like maybe a little bit more darker clothing so that you have to tell people why the white is out of order.
I was very much of a tomboy growing up, so skinny jeans and dark clothing was more of my thing. I wore a white dress for the first time in several months.
Wow. Okay, got it. Yeah, like what's happening here?
Nobody seemed to notice, but it was all for me. I was putting it up for myself. I was like, this is who I believe I am. If you don't recognize it, then that is not who I want to associate myself with.
And you had thought about this over time, or did you just wake up one morning and decide this was going to happen? Or, I mean, it was instinctive or thought through or all above? Or
that night, I was going through so many emotions. I remember reading a book earlier, it's when the young lady gets assigned a letter A on her. Long story short, they put the letter A on her because she committed adultery. And they put that A on her so everybody would know it and to shame her. I wanted to do the exact opposite.
Oh, just come out with the pure white dress, open heart, innocence. Exactly. Yeah, it's innocence.
It's the universal color for innocence.
Surely, yeah.
And I wanted to do that.
Very nice. Very powerful statement.
And then nobody seemed to notice except for Michael, which I found out a couple months later. I was like, nobody seemed to notice that. And he's like, no, I did. You never really wear dresses, so
yeah,
it's a
day
statement.
Is pretty vivid for me. I remember. Yet he kept his mouth shut.
And then because of that instance, he decided to pull himself back just because he thought that was the best thing to do. As a quiet person who's paired, you don't want to initiate
somebody
anything.
Else harm, or drama in their life or anything. It's exactly what he didn't have in mind, right?
The mature thing is to just pull away.
Withdraw from here for a minute, yeah.
And I was so confused because he never even gave me warning to that.
It was a pull away.
A complete pull away, a complete 180.
Ouch. Those can hurt. Especially in the mix of everything else you're going through.
Exactly. And I was so confused. And that put me into a deeper spiral of what am I doing wrong?
Mm-hmm.
All these people are drawn away from me. What am I doing wrong? And then a couple months later, after several tries of me trying to contact him, trying to talk to him in class, him ignoring me, trying to text him.
Wow, yeah, pull out, gone dark.
Yes. He would give me one-sentence messages.
This is his Pisces stubborn foot down, kind of like, okay, that went too far. Can't have it. And it was out. Okay, so you've been trying to groom back in anything from him.
Oh, definitely. Constantly. And as a stubborn person myself, I kept trying to fix it in my way of just initiating something. That's just the way I am. I just want to go for it. And with his stubbornness, he just wasn't taking it at all whatsoever.
Wow, damn.
And finally, after months and months of patience, I knew a part of me. I tried to move on. I tried to be that single life, be that girl that's just in school, studying, doing her thing. After months of patience, I knew, don't go for anybody. Just wait. Something's gonna happen. I don't know why. And that thought in the back of my head was constantly there, possibly from stubbornness and wanting what I wanted. And then finally, a month before school ended, I get a message randomly at 11 p.m. It is so late at night, I was just about to go to bed. He messages me and says, hey, can I call you? And we had the longest chat in a long time. I believe several hours.
Like
and
a total sit down.
And most of it was just me saying, why me? Why are you talking to me? He didn't have an answer for me at the time. And then in a few episodes back, he reveals that it was an epiphany of sorts.
Right, exactly. So, and that is kind of an interesting thing that he didn't have an answer, right? It didn't seem like the motive was there in the same way you've seen it before. Because if somebody with ulterior motives or motives would kind of come up with an answer, all right, of why you, or try to placate those questions in order to kind of get back in your good standings or whatever. But he didn't still have an answer.
No, and I wanted closure. I wanted an answer.
Because you didn't want to have somebody do this to you again either, though, right? Or him in particular, right? Especially if you're going to get back in.
Especially with that. And I don't like having things left unanswered. I'm a very concrete person with things like that.
Me too. Jeez.
And not having an answer just messed me up even more. Like, what do I do now? Do I just take this as it is? What does he mean by this? Some people might think, well, if he's not answering, is this some sort of like friends with benefits? What is he going here? And then we started talking again. The chemistry came back. We called each other even more than we had before. I went over to his house and I met his dog, Callie.
His pride and joy, his love. So his first love before you. Yeah.
She's the most beautiful thing. Oh my goodness. Gorgeous. And I remember one time Gabe asked us, we were just sitting right by the doorstep. I was putting my shoes on because we were about to leave. He was going to drop me off at my house. And I like sat closer to him. He wrapped his hand around me and Gabe was like, oh, you're taking your girl home? And he was like, whoa, no. She's not my girl. And I'm telling you, this was about a month before he called me at that night. And so this was during that time where he didn't want anything to be labeled. Because what took me a long time to find out is with him, he takes commitments very seriously. I take commitments seriously, right. But he doesn't even want to even say that word until he knows what he knows. And that messed me up even more.
That's not typical high school boys?
No, I had bad luck with boys growing up all the time.
Talk about that a little bit. The podcasts are fun for other stories. What are some of the bad luck stories?
Every single guy I had a crush on never liked me back. I was the type of girl that would constantly get friend zoned. I was so close with the boys, they recognized me as the boys.
And the tomboy, you're like the flowering tomboy, right? Like they're gorgeous, but they're keeping you in the tomboy friend zone, huh?
Definitely. And I didn't fully become myself until high school, so I wasn't really looking the best either.
She just did her hands and did over the two hands over the striker pose in her hair. It's like, it wasn't all this back then.
No. I was the one girl that always put her hair up in a ponytail, wore khakis to school, and a collared shirt. And there was nothing too special about me at the time that you could see in person, because outside of school, I would have my hair down. I would dress the way I wanted to. I was an aspiring fashion model that my parents took me to classes and took photos with me. So I had this completely different look outside of school that I felt like maybe I was pretty. But during school, it was nothing of the sort.
You went 180. You did a totally different look. Huh?
Oh, no, wow. I was so bland.
Boy, that's so fascinating because, you got all these other people pulling at you in one direction to be a certain person. Then you've got this other kind of person you're being over here, right? Then you're going to school and playing that down.
Oh, of course.
I've seen this before and seen it myself in the sense that when you're beautiful from the inside out, there's a glow, and if you glow too much, so you become a target. Do you feel that way a little bit?
For myself, I didn't have a glow at first. Growing up, never really had my own personality. I tried to. I definitely had a Natalie personality. I was a very outgoing kid, very loud, but I didn't know exactly who I was because I was being forced to take piano classes. I was forced to be into the dancing scene. I now am thankful for that. I identify myself as a dancer now, But growing up, I never really saw the good in that. I felt like this wasn't me. I'm not a concrete person like a ballerina is. I don't fit into the just concrete, black and white, this girl has to stand like this in this pose and like that pose. My teachers would constantly give me warnings about me standing the wrong way or pointing my foot the wrong way.
Sounds like a kind of square peg, round circle kind of thing, right?
Definitely. That's why I meshed so well with the genre of hip hop growing up, because I was a tomboy and I got to be able to express myself. Because what I've noticed is as a dancer, all my friends who loved ballet could never do hip hop because hip hop didn't give you concrete directions. It didn't tell you where to stand, where to face. It told you this is the feel. Do what you feel like meshes with the feel. Showcase that feel in the way you want to, not the way your instructor tells you to.
From the soul, like you're saying. It's like breakdancing when I was growing up, right? Everybody could come out in the circle and do their own thing, and it didn't have to be...
Yes, and that's the beauty of it. That's the beauty of art, is being able to showcase whatever you want to express. Because from what I've learned, artists, their main purpose is to tell a story, tell whatever they want to, because that's what an artist does. They want to express. And I never understood boxing someone in with that. And so that's why I had difficulties just being myself, because I was boxed in. And the only time I could finally showcase who I truly was when I was starting to get into high school. And there you don't have any uniforms. You got to choose your classes. I got a little bit more freedom because growing up I never had freedom. I wasn't allowed to hang out with my friends after school until I was in 7th grade.
Yeah, tell us a little bit about your family life a little bit and like growing up. There's obviously someone who loves you very much and people who love you much to get you in these programs.
Definitely.
But tell us about that. Where were you born? Tell us about your family. Just give us some whatever lowdown you feel like sharing.
So I was born in America, but I was born to a half-immigrant family. My father was born in Brooklyn, but he's Puerto Rican. And my mother was born in the former Soviet Union. And my grandma was also born in that place and time. And they grew up with stricter conditions and traditions. So that when my mother finally moved to America and she met my dad, that was where I came from. And then she decided to bring the rest of her family down. And then I grew up with a very different household than any American child would think of growing up.
I want to hear more about that, but before we go there, just what state, where exactly were you born in America?
Florida.
Florida. Okay, so here you are still in Florida.
Yes.
There's so much conversation around multiculti, what's right to say, what's not. Do you see yourself as a Russian, Puerto Rican woman, or do you see yourself as something else? Do you ever even say that?
Whenever I introduce myself, I find it difficult to, because when a family is from a country in a former conglomerate, they were born in a country called Uzbekistan. And not a lot of people know where that is. It's sort of hidden. It's in Central Asia. There's a lot of other countries around it that are more well-known, like Kazakhstan. And then we're going to talk about like the Middle East, Afghanistan. There's all those other countries around it that it's kind of in the shadows. That when I try to tell people exactly where my family is from, they typically don't know where it is. So I have to resort back to just saying, oh, well, I'm half Russian, half Puerto Rican. Because it's easy. I speak Russian but my family is from a different country. It's just less to explain. But for myself, I don't really feel like I need to anymore because I'm just myself. And whenever I start speaking Russian, that's when I feel like I need to explain. But until then, I really don't need to.
That's funny. I've got some Russian friends who'll be listening. Can you just say something to our Russian audience while you're here? They'll love to hear from you, I'm sure.
Здравствуйте, спасибо, что вы пришли и что вы слушаете сегодня. And thank you for being here. So
Awesome.
Basically what I just said, to translate to you other viewers, I said, thank you for stopping by and thank you for listening.
I love it. I might just...
Simple and sweet, right?
We might have to just put that on like little promos at the end every time. Just your perfect Russian sounding voice. You have a beautiful voice, by the way. We didn't get to say it on the show.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's nice to hear. If you had an audience who would know where you were talking about, what would you describe yourself as? If it's not just Russian, Puerto Rican, what would you say? I
am part Uzbek, part Puerto Rican, and I'm from Florida.
There you go. I'd say it like that, people. Right? So that would be
Yes.
that'd be it, right? Now back to the house. Everybody's here now. Now, when you say everybody's here, that means your mom.
My mother brought my grandmother down and one of my uncles. And then from that point, my other uncle came down with his wife and the rest of my cousins. And then their family friends started coming down. There is a mini multicultural community in the city I'm from. It started off, I'd like to say, just before my mom came down here. She came down here because of a friend. And I'd like to think that that friend started this whole mini community.
Like that, like a catalyst, like right, one person and boom.
To compare it to Brighton Beach in New York, that's a mini Russian, very big Russian community there. And this is a sort of mini Uzbek version of that.
Wow. I guess it happens like that, right? Where and just everybody's like, well, you're there or we can be there because they want to be in that again. They want to be around each other and share food and culture.
When people move to a different country, they don't know much about it, especially America is huge compared to Europe and even smaller countries. The rest of the countries are as big as our state. So when you move into such a big new world, you want to stay close to home. That's how humans really work. It's that nature versus nurture. I remember reading a study one time. There were these babies of different races, and they were all put into a room together. They were all scattered. And then over time, you would notice that similar colored babies would start grouping up together. And the conclusions from that scientists have come up with is that humans in nature or in nurture, there's a discussion with that too, naturally come together with similarities. And there is a weird thing about that because nobody really wants to think of that.
I mean, you're like birds of a feather, but like,
Yeah.
like gene pool, like you have the same nose as me or something, or like you smell familiar or something.
It
right?
makes you feel at home, sort of. So when you move into a whole new world, you want to find somebody that lives there. And then they're like, oh, well, I live in Florida. You're like, okay, well, I'll move down there so I'll have some comfort to transition into this new life.
Wow, love it. Now, before we go there, actually, I want to hear that, but it's kind of fun. We can do some skip around this show. Now you're talking about chemistry with Michael. You guys are just now getting back into cahoots with each other a little bit. You've gone through this night of talking. What happened then? We're going to like totally bounce around people. We're going to like hit multi-track.
So from that point, we have gotten closer than ever. And knowing myself and very stubborn, wanting to see him all the time and wanting to really bounce on this chemistry we have, I wanted to really get into it. We started really hanging out with each other.
And how long ago was that again? Remind me.
About a year ago. I want to say a little over a year ago. We started from only seeing each other once a day at school to hearing each other on the phone 2 days a week to seeing each other in person every single day of the week over the summer.
Wow, that was a summer of love then.
Oh, definitely.
Wow, you had your own summer of love.
Well, one of those summer of loves that don't just last in the summer.
Exactly, yeah, exactly. It kept going.
Yes, here we are about a year and a half later.
How awesome is that? What was the year of the summer of love? We're just going to put it out there.
This, I want to say, was 2019 in the beginning. So it's about to hit 2 years at this point.
That was a good year, I think, 2019.
Oh, very much a good year. And that summer started to slowly end as school starts trickling back in. And then I remember homecoming happened. And homecoming was the time that I still thought we were going as mutual friends that were emotionally and physically exclusive to each other, but didn't want to label it. Who needs to label things anyways?
Right. I can hear it now, yeah.
And then homecoming happens and he tells me, how about you be my date? How about we actually go together and we're not just there as mutual friends? How about I pick you up, we go get dinner together, and then we come together. We go to the dance together as a quote unquote date. And then halfway through that evening after we dance on the dance floor, he sets me aside, closes my eyes, and then puts rings on my finger. Yeah. And then says, I want you to be my girlfriend.
Well. You heard it here first, people. If you're not gushing already, come on. That's awesome. All right.
So sweet, ain't it?
So sweet.
Better than I could have ever imagined being told to be my girlfriend.
Right, with the low lights and the disco ball and the music and like high school dreamy kind of thing.
Yes,
right?
And our school was an outside school, so he decided to take me out into the night sky with all the stars to tell me that.
No thought left behind here. He
oh,
thought it all out.
Definitely not.
Yeah, all the way down to the rings.
Definitely. And I hear a couple months after he tells me, oh, I was shaking the whole day. I was shaking to my boots. He's like, I was holding that ring in my pocket, just checking it to make sure it's still there.
That's good that you guys can share that kind of stuff too.
Oh, we are so close. I naturally don't lie to people. But with him, I can't even hide anything. We're just so easy to talk to each other. It flows so naturally. Our chemistry's there. And we don't even need to see each other every day. I feel like the honeymoon phase, what people call it, we had that and now we're past it. Because during that honeymoon phase, I was still very kind of toxic, actually, because I was still going through my own things. So I was pushing us to be more together every day, constantly making sure everything was good and everything was grand and that nothing bad was happening. But because I was being so critical as a Virgo, I'm a very critical person, I was making it worse. With these things, you want to be as natural as possible. You don't want to plan everything. There is no plan with love. Love in and of itself is such a natural, beautiful thing. You can't turn it into a math problem.
And you can't possess it either.
Exactly. So during that time, he was getting really stressed, and I felt so bad afterwards.
Because you were kind of putting the heat on, like, you got all this, and I want this, and there's some codependency there, of course. It's
Definitely.
natural. But he wanted to make you happy and please you, and
Yes.
right? Yeah.
And I'm thankful for that greatly. But because of that, I was really making it difficult on our honeymoon phase. And then after that, he was like, he put his foot down, and ooh boy, I cried. But we needed that. And it was kind of difficult rebuilding. I made some mistakes of going back into that critical idea, but then we kept rebuilding. And now I feel like we're at this good mutual zone to where if there is something that happens, we tell each other right away. And I feel like, and knock on wood, of course, I feel like nothing bad has happened in a long time. Because even though there are some instances where I push his buttons on purpose.
And on purpose, yeah, exactly.
Yes.
You can put that out loud. I almost muted out the on purpose, but we got to hear you say it out loud. Okay,
On purpose. Yeah. There we go. Sorry.
Yep, here's that one.
We work it out almost right away. I give him his space. He gives me mine. We don't have an extreme codependency like I wanted us to in the beginning. You don't need that. You know, I enjoy it, but we don't need it.
Well said. When you do fight, what do you guys fight about?
Typically, possibly me pushing boundaries or miscommunication was a big one for a long time because I have this problem of when I'm upset, I shut down. I don't talk a lot in general, so not talking a lot to talking not at all. It aches me to talk.
Freezes or whatever.
I freeze. And so he tries edging these words out of me, and I can't. And then he's like, how am I supposed to fix something if you won't even tell me what I need to fix? And then most of the time we realize I needed to fix it. From that point, that's really all our fights are. It's just a little bit of miscommunication.
How can I help you? Or how can you help me? Or how can you help me help you? Or how can we balance this out?
Oh, where does this need to go? It seems so first worldy, but that's all it is.
That's right. That's your problems.
And it's great.
And from your generation, how do you see relationship around you? You're in a committed relationship. You're a young woman. You're in college, which is great because you guys are under, a fair amount of stress and living and work and college and life. And the fact that you're not at each other's throats, or you're also not trying to make each other into something else that you're not. So you get to feel very understood, and you get to feel very nurtured in your relationship. And I know he does too, which is so beautiful. That's most of our desire, right? I mean, because you guys have arrived. But in that, how do you see your generation think about relationships, separate from you and Michael? And maybe if you were single, what would it look like? What would it look like in this generation? Because I think a lot of people in the multi-generational audience is very curious about these podcasts because you're telling people what they don't really know.
Well, with our generation, Generation Z, I was born in 2001. I'm older Generation Z. As Michael said in a previous episode, I was born before 9/11. Rest in peace to everyone there. My condolences to all the families. I was older Gen Z, and with Gen Z in general, is we have this mutual understanding that relationships shouldn't be forced, and that a traditional lifestyle is something that most of us probably don't need. Gen Z can also be defined with the fact that the generation that raised us, Gen X, a lot of us had to live through our families divorcing, mine in particular. And we see that sometimes just forcing a relationship and forcing to be into this cookie cutter nuclear family lifestyle does not work for everybody. So we learned that we need to move things at our own pace, and we shouldn't rush into courting. We shouldn't rush into a label. We shouldn't rush into being in a relationship, marrying, and then suffering, and then risking the lives of our children by divorcing and then having them grow up in splitted families. So that's why you notice us take things slower. You notice that as we grow older, with older Generation Z and young millennials, that a lot of us aren't getting married right away. We're taking our college years very by ourselves. A lot of us like to discover ourselves through that time, especially with us growing up with the 2016 gay marriage legalization federally. So because of that, everything is open to us. We see things in a whole new light, and we understand that not everything has to be like we're forced to be.
Well, that's, I guess, a generation breaking through, a true revolution, emotional revolution. I mean, is it your heart's feeling this? Is your mind's feeling this? I mean, how do you guys come up with these kinds of complete changes to the matriarch and the patriarch that you knew for every generation above you? You guys are breaking the mold. How and why?
I feel like we're a lot more in tune with our hearts and both our brains as well. Because growing up, we live in an era of technology that we had to grow up a little bit faster. The internet is scary, basically. And we had to use our brains in a lot more mature way. Because when you're on social media at the age of 10, how good is that for you when you're surrounded by all these adults spewing all their narratives? Grooming kids, that's also a very hard issue that's going on at this age. We had to figure out and do a lot of research of what is right, because we have this huge access to technology and media, social media, videos, where we see so many relationships on TV, and you put two and two together and you figure out, okay, this is a common issue. That's our brain side. And then our heart side is like, what can I do to still get that love?
Right. Yeah. And stoke those fires and
I still want relationships. A lot of us still want to grow up and have a family, even if it's not as traditional as a nuclear family. But that's why we are very selective with these things. And that brain side of the research and the videos of seeing all these different examples of broken families, fixed and good relationships, all these movies that we grew up with. And a lot of us actually that watched YouTube videos growing up, that's a new platform now, have seen these YouTube creators be in long-lasting relationships and then break up just like our parents did.
Wow. Yeah. It's the three things come to mind I think is really interesting on this one. One is that being the fact that you came from this generation that was so informationally informed, if you will, and you knew you had access to it, that you guys had this perspective that you didn't have the right to not know.
Yes.
You knew that you had to admit that you know, because you see the generation above you and what a shit show that was and how painful that was even for you guys growing up. I mean, Michael's talked about the impacts of his mother and my divorce tremendously. And I always said that's not what he's down for, right? And so you saw that, and then you've got all this media at your fingertips, and that it's somehow you guys kind of just all kind of slowed down enough to say, we're going to really just start focusing and paying attention to the things that really matter as humans.
Definitely.
And it starts with like our intimate relationships, and we're going to just try to take those a little bit slower and more mindful. And another thing that comes to mind with me is on, I've talked about a little bit, and I'm kind of exploring, is the idea of designer relationships, right? Where you design them. They don't have to be conventional.
Yes.
Right. And now that you can have all the sexes in the mix and everything, right? And all that freedom that we can all love who we want to love,
freedom.
right? That's
love the
beautiful.
freedom.
I remember Michael celebrating that too, and everybody just feeling so, and for him, he was sharing that just felt so good that he knew that his gay friends could now be okay with loving each other, and they could possibly get married, and their dreams could come true someday. Beautiful. It's just really beautiful, right? So now you guys are designing a relationship. Well, what's it look like? I mean, how are you guys designing it? A while ago, you guys were maybe not going to go to school. Now you decided you're going to go to school. You're deep in that. How are you designing your life? What does it look like? What are you designing together?
Michael and I personally aren't designing anything anymore together.
Okay.
Because I feel like designing things in one thing is amazing, and another thing feels like you're being pushed into that box again. Because to me, designing things now creates a plan.
There you go. Wow.
And this plan is...
I needed to hear that. Yeah.
And this plan is what got us into this whole idea of, well, do we need college? Do we not? Do we have to grow up together? Without a plan and with our own separate plans, we can grow together mutually without having to exactly be with each other all the time and plan every single thing together. You don't need that all
Present
the time.
and future, you're saying now too.
Yes.
Yeah, our plan is to not have a plan and like to grow with each other.
If I need to go to school at a different time, for me, I can't afford going to school over the summer, so I can't graduate as quickly as he can. I have to spend my time in the fall and transfer later. That's okay.
Totally.
He can leave without me. We don't need to plan going together. Of course, everybody wants that.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But we're all mature to at least put our foot down at one point and be like, okay, we don't exactly need this all the time. And I think that's what helped us a lot, was just saying, okay, let's forget the plan. If you need to do what you need to do, go do that. I'll do me. We'll meet each other again. Our souls have met each other twice already. If we came back from months of not even acknowledging each other's existence, then we can do it again.
Nice. I love it. It's so inspiring. It's beautifully inspiring. And I learned from that. I think I want to throw out the designer relationship thing now. I think I'm done with it. I think you just helped me put a button in that one or whatever. Put a fork in it. That one's out. Okay. The idea is that no plan is the best plan. Okay, so now back to the wild, crazy family. So now they're all in a town together. Everybody's there. You're growing up. At this time, you're about, 8 or 9 or 10 when they're all there? And
honestly, earlier. They came in so fast. My dad was even like, you're not doing it that fast, are you? I thought we were supposed to...
Yeah, we're supposed to live together for a little while. She's like, no, we're bringing them all in.
Hello, the mom's here, the brother's here, everybody's in.
Wow, I can see the visual of them all walking through the door, yeah.
Yeah, definitely. And I remember because my grandma couldn't speak English, I had to learn a new language. It took me a long time to speak. I think my mom said about 2 years. I don't know if I'm butchering that, but she said it took me a lot longer than the other kids because I was growing up bilingual. And then because my grandmother was the one raising me all the time because my dad was at work, my mom was at work, she raised me in a more traditional lifestyle that's more traditionally Asian, traditionally Russian. Never really got to go out. I was able to play with my friends as a little kid growing up, but I was never allowed to do sleepovers. I was never allowed to have boyfriends. I was never allowed to have too much fun. I had to have some discipline. She had me study all the time. She taught me multiplication a year before my school did. Same thing with division and all the other math stuff. I remember I would go home, I would play some games, and then when she would be home, she would be like, okay, Natalie, take this chapter book, read 5 pages of this chapter, memorize it verbatim, and then recite it on a piece of paper. You're not allowed to summarize.
Wow.
You have to write it down verbatim, and she would circle or X the right or wrong words and then have me do it again. And I thanks to her,
I wish we all had one of those in our life. Yeah.
Oh, it was a pain at the time. I remember Gulliver's Travels, like the back of my hand.
Gulliver's Travels deeply ingrained in my childhood. Yeah. Memorize, exactly.
Thanks to that, I have a very good memory
now. Yeah.
I remember even at that age, I was like, wow, no other kid is
going to be coming rocking with this package or all this information.
Yes. And I remember eating a lot more traditional home-cooked meals. I wasn't allowed to have chicken nuggets. No McDonald's.
You were like in a bubble. You were like not in the United States in a way. You were kind of in a
Yes.
East Asia, or, in
I
Asia.
couldn't.
Asia, yeah.
I didn't even have burgers for the longest of time. I thought I wouldn't like burgers until I finally tried one, in like middle school or high school. I grew up with this preconceived notion of not even liking, I don't know, mustard. Because I never had mustard at home.
Garbage is probably what your grandmother said. Oh, don't look at that. That's all garbage.
Exactly. I thought I wouldn't even like Chick-fil-A or other fast foods. But hello.
We've learned.
There you go, free sponsorship.
That's fine. Chick-fil-A, you got one free on us this time.
Whoop. There you go. I like fast food sometimes. What can I say?
Yeah, and yet you're a vegetarian right now. Is that or mostly?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. I'm a lot more free with that. I'm a little bit more of a pescatarian.
Pescatarian, yeah, that's what.
Michael is more of
He's going fully veggie.
Fully veggie. He's the one that keeps me in check sometimes.
I kept saying, "You sure you want to be a pescatarian?" He's like, "Oh, I think I'm just doing veggies."
I love seafood.
I love seafood too.
I'm such a seafood person. I love my veggies since grandma raised me with eating a lot of veggies. Didn't have much candy. It was fruits and veggies.
And tell us a little bit while we're on that with grandma, because, she was a businesswoman and like a real matriarch of her community back home.
Oh,
right?
definitely.
I think you were telling me about that.
She would tell me stories of her owning her own little grocery store. And not even just little. She says it's a little bit bigger too. But she paid for 2 homes. She bought 2 homes. They weren't homes at that country. It's a lot more of like apartments. That's just how the buildings are built. But she owned 2 apartments all to herself, renovated them, had her own libraries in there, raised her 3 kids, my mom and my 2 uncles. And she was a very strong woman.
Still is.
Yes. She took care of the house all by herself, fed 3 kids, even when she couldn't feed herself sometimes. She fed them. She took them all to college. My mom was at the top university in her country, studying with the president's daughters at the time. My other uncle, he wanted to be a lawyer and also a police detective. And then my other uncle, she managed to buy him his first car because he wanted to be a mechanic.
But no better way than to start taking care of your own car and learn it. Wow, and so she had this range of scholar aspects, but yet still accepted her other child for mechanic. That's a good to trade. She was probably a very communal matriarch of the, kind of the woman's a woman,
all
right?
The time.
Baked.
Everybody knew it. She would crack the window open. You would smell the food from down the block, and they'd be like, "Yep, that's Grandma Natalia," and there she goes, who I'm named after.
How cool is that? And you're named after.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you guys talk about having children at all, or has that ever come up? Or
because I grew up in a traditional household, I always wanted kids. And hearing Michael, he does sound like he wants kids. I have my own little perfect vision of it. I want 3 kids, 2 boys and a girl.
Who's the oldest?
The 2 boys are the oldest, and they take care of the little girl. Perfect little vision I have.
Perfect vision.
Yeah. We haven't talked about kids much, but he knows he wants to name one of them Michael to keep the family name going. I believe Gibran is in the question as well, possibly.
I think we're going to end up coming back to your family on the next show, but let's go back into kind of what you're doing now. You're pursuing what kind of career now, or what kind of education?
I'm currently going into accounting. I'm currently getting my AA at a college near me, and then I want to transfer to a bigger university and get a master's in accounting because I want to graduate with the eligibility of getting a CPA, and then I want to take that further with me. I want to be able to have accounting as my stepping stone because I want to branch out and maybe do other business ventures or even combine business with activism, maybe do nonprofit accounting because accountants, what I've learned in class, are naturally supposed to be ethical. That's just our main thing. And that's what fits with me. I want to help people and I want to know that I'm not going to be screwing anybody over or messing with somebody or exploiting anybody. So I want to be able to take that and use my math, use my activism. Who knows where that'll take me, but I know I want accounting as my stepping stone.
That sounds like a real contribution to the world, David. It sounds like you want to use your services to be a better person. Or there's a moral aptitude, at least. You're picking your career based on the ability for you to feel like there's a core ethics there that can protect you in the career world.
Yes, because to bring us, to call us back to the Generation Z information thing, we didn't ask to be so informed. Our parents were growing up as we were at that time, so they figured maybe it was a good idea to give us these new phones, these new smartphones to adapt us to this new age. Was it a good idea? It's a controversial topic, exactly.
Yeah, we'll come back to that one on the show.
So we never asked for all this information, but since we have it, we've been using it. And I've gotten plenty informed over the past year. That's just my thing. I want to learn more. I want to stay knowledgeable on any topic that there is. No one wants to be kept in the shadows, and it's good to catch up on your news sometimes. That's what led me to really push myself forward and be like, I don't want to just stand by. I want to put in my contribution. How big or how small, I don't know, but I know I want to make a contribution. And that's starting off with being knowledgeable. Maybe after college, I'll help an organization spread awareness, because the first step is education. The first step is being informed. So after I get my degree, who knows where that'll take me, but I know that's definitely one of the places I want to be.
That's a trajectory. I like it. And then another thing that's kind of interesting is that, when you were talking about being a dancer, but not this particular frame, or like you had this perfect image, even you have a perfect image of what your family might look like, even though you can't control these things, right?
Yeah.
But then you also said you want to be a model, and obviously you're absolutely gorgeous, and you have all the potential to be. You know you are. Yes, I love it. And I'm so flattered to just have you in front of me. But there's also the fact that you this height thing, right? And so everybody has this perspective of like, oh, you're tall enough, right? And you've just proven that wrong, right? I mean, like it's like you're not too short or too tall to me, but it's like I know the model people or the guys like my old generation guys are like, oh well, and no girl should want to be a model if they're not this exact thing, right? And that's been changing, and now I've got you on an Elle magazine. Is that how they pronounce it? Elle?
Elle, yes.
Elle. She's in a European Elle multi-page spread. It's on my desk. Anytime you guys want to come down and see it for yourself, I'm so proud of it.
Oh, I thank you.
So now you're going to be a CPA. You're a model. You're in a healthy relationship that you love being in. And what else in life feels good?
I believe that's a big part of it.
That's a big part of it.
I feel like I'm finally in my zone. I'm in my space. I live in the dormitories at my school right now, so I'm finally out of the restricted environment I grew up in.
Wow, that's a big one. Now that we got a little taste of it with grandma, and it says, the protection, and you've been protected. And just on that, I think we're kind of starting to come tail end, so it's good because I will be doing more of these. But so grandma got to meet Michael, obviously, and start to eventually accept that you had this new boyfriend, right?
Yeah.
And how did that go down over time?
Oh, well, they're so close now, actually.
Are they?
I would go up to my room, change my clothes when he'd come over, or, get my room ready to, like, in case he wants to do homework with me. Nothing anymore.
Yeah, of course.
And while I'd be up there just, figuring things out and getting myself ready, I'd come down and they're deep in conversation. She's telling him the new things. Even though there's this language barrier, he can now communicate with her easily. He gets her because talking to grandma, she has this broken English, and she understands more English than she does speak it. And so therefore it's like a whole new language that a person has to learn, not just Russian, but this whole new extra step, right? And he's started to figure out that language.
Yeah, he got to learn it from scratch because it was just grandma's. He's like, I don't have to learn Russian. I just have to learn grandma's.
Yes, exactly.
And all of a sudden now he knows grandma speak.
And they're really close now. She tells him about the new news she watched on TV, the new thing she's baking, right? And so they're really close. He's close with my mom. He's good with my uncle too. My uncle's very selective and very protective over our family. And I knew that when they made that nice mutual handshake, that it was good there too.
You were there, good. Wow.
Yeah.
Phew.
Yeah.
Well, as we wrap the show, would you care to share any last advice with us, around, obviously the show's around mixed messages. It's really just a kind of conversation about life and relationship, love, and all the things that come with it, right? The shadows and the light. Anything you can share with us just to kind of close out the show tonight?
Well, I hope you all enjoyed hearing me today. It's my first podcast, so give me a little slack,
awesome.
guys.
It was beautiful. Yeah, no, it was great. I think people are going to love it.
Well, I do want to say that I hope I brought in a little bit more of a perspective of a Gen Z's look on relationships, look on technology, and look on a person who's not so traditional herself. I hope that we can now have this gap be a little bit closed further. Hearing part 1 with Michael's, talking about boomers, talking about all the other stuff. I hope hearing it from a different point of view that this brings us a little closer to. Hopefully we'll even get to talk about a few other topics on the show. We'll never know.
Honest, that was awesome. That was our
Yes,
first podcast
yes,
together.
yes.
It won't be our
Thank you.
last. I love you, Natalie.
Love you.
Thank you. All right. Till next time. We'll see you.
All right. Bye.
Bye. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. Mixed messages. 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 Messages.